Good morning. I'm Dr. Ashok Rai, the President and CEO of Purveya Health. Thank you for joining us at our Implicit Bias Conference. This is our fourth conference that Purveya has had since we hired a Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at the end of 2020, Dr. Renita Robinson. We appreciate everything that Renita has brought to Purveya and to our community and to the state of Wisconsin in her new role. Today, we are marrying the conversation about systemic racism on advocacy work, healthcare, and victim services as it relates to domestic violence, which it is no coincidence that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We intend to demonstrate that intimate partner victimization is a social determinant of health, and that partnering across the community makes Wisconsin a better place for all of us. This conference is birthed out of the Brown County Coordinated Community Response Team's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Just this past Tuesday, we came together with community partners to launch the Be Safe campaign, an initiative focused on reaching those dealing with domestic abuse to ensure they know local help is here and available. In 2021, perpetrators of domestic violence ended 80 lives in Wisconsin. This is up from 68 in 2020. According to the most recent National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey summary report, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the United States have experienced some sort of physical violence by an intimate partner. Wisconsin is not immune. In fact, in Wisconsin, 36.3% of women and 32.1% of men experience intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner rape, and/or intimate partner stalking in their lifetimes. What can we do about this? Educate ourselves and do something about these statistics. Purveya takes care of people with passion, pride, and respect. That is our mission. We are caring for visible and invisible wounds, and it is important for us to offer care and support to victims hidden in plain sight. This conference aims to normalize a challenging and stigma-filled conversation. It aims to help address the barriers to giving all victims the kind of care that helps them heal and thrive. This conference provides the opportunity to connect our communities and learn the impact implicit bias has on individuals providing healthcare, advocacy, and victim services. Implicit bias is connected to individual and community health level outcomes. It gets in the way of many victims receiving the support they need and of organizations thriving. Understanding unconscious bias and its impact on day-to-day functions of workplaces is more important than ever. Conference workshops will highlight the expertise of individuals and entities across Wisconsin who are creating the opportunity for better health and outcomes in all people. Attendees will leave with resources and tools to be a part of the solution to needed change in Wisconsin. Conference content will provide support across industries to the general public, health professionals, and supporters of victims of violence. If you offer healthcare to, advocate for, or love a victim of domestic violence, or if you're a member of the human community, content from today's conference will provide you with tools and perspective that may help you better care for clients, patients, and your extended family. Sessions will provide answers to questions like, what is implicit bias? How does implicit bias impact health outcomes? Or how does add versus fit eliminate bias in the hiring process? We believe we are doing our part to change the growing victim narrative, one person at a time. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. We look forward to your participation. And now I'll turn it over to Renita.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Ryan. Welcome to this conference. Welcome to the work that is being done with the Coordinated Community Response team here in the greater Brown County area. And we're excited about a day that we feel will make a contribution to just a real broad range of individuals, to advocates, to hospital, people working in the hospital, to the average person in the community. We feel like the content today will really expand the understanding of domestic violence, give you some real-time information on how much it's occurring in our community, and then and give us some tools to be able to be a part of the change that's necessary here in Wisconsin. And so I have some folks that are teaming up with me, and they are members of the Brown County, the Greater Brown County Coordinated Community Response. And so they'll be jumping on the screen here shortly, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of information to answer the question of why are we even in this conversation. A lot of times people say that's not happening here. Well, the reality is it's actually happening here, and it's happening across Wisconsin. This educational event is really just Prevea's example to show that we're really committed to creating equity. We're committed to looking at the historical factors that have caused victims and individuals in our community really to have these disparate impact in terms of getting well when they have been abused, or getting well when they have some ailment that arises. And we really are paying attention to root causes. We know that you have to get at the root to really create systemic change. And so we're looking at social determinants of health. We're looking at really understanding what implicit bias is, how it functions in individuals, in systems, in access, and just a number of things. For the conference, we actually have done some things over. We had offered an implicit bias conference in February of 2020, and there were 3 sessions that were very, very highly attended and received extraordinary remarks from the people that participated. And we brought those back to you. And so we will have Alonzo Kelly, who will be presenting on advocacy, access, and equity. We have a panel actually on the issues or the challenges associated with FIT, like hiring for FIT, and how that relates to serving domestic violence victims, and just a host of perspectives. We have some sessions that are dealing with an Indigenous perspective, some sessions that are dealing with other marginalized people groups. We're just excited about the diversity that's represented in this conference today, and we're certain that you will have, at the end of the time, content that you look back on and say, I'm really grateful that I attended that session. And so as we talk about things like safe and affordable housing access, bodily autonomy, prevention education, economic equity, we know that those conversations will support the reduction of violence. And so when people know better, we really do think that people do better. So as we focus on the content associated with access, with advocacy, with education, health equity, and of course, implicit bias, we believe that we will kind of whet your appetite to dig deeper and learn more. According to a recent news release, people in Wisconsin actually, in Wisconsin in 2021, domestic violence homicides took place in 21 different counties. So across Wisconsin, in 21 different counties, someone died as a result of a domestic violence homicide. And that is at a rate of 1 death every 4.5 days. And of those who died, 65 were actual homicide victims, up from 58 in 2020. And 11 of those who died were perpetrators of homicide who died by suicide. That is up from 8 in 2022. The report shows that over half, 52% of those victims were the perpetrators in current or former intimate partner situations. And so we know that the data is telling us a story, and we have to listen to that data, and we have to respond. And we know also that coordinated community responses are talking together. That's why they're excellent. That's why coordinated community responses work, because they put the blame where it belongs, and they share information that makes us more effective at actually adjudicating the situation and making sure that offenders are held accountable, and making sure that we increase information that will help the broad community be safe. So in addition to data from the 2021 homicides, the domestic violence homicide report that is presented by End Abuse Wisconsin offers historical, national, and global context and spotlights that link between mass violence and intimate partner violence, and the link between family violence and pet abuse. And then it addresses interventions with those who cause harm. And so we really encourage you to look at that domestic violence homicide report in October and in all 11 other months of the year, because as we normalize this conversation, we know that more will be done and more will get done. And so I'd like to invite my panelists to join us on the screen now. Hey, Miss Holly, good morning, and Lauren and Bev and Stephanie and Dave, thank you all so much. And Kevin, thank you guys so much for being here. You get friendly fast when you're kind of working in the trenches with each other. And so what I'd like to do is just invite each panelist to share who they are, the agency that they work with, and then what they're called upon most usually to do when we are starting to support victims. And on my screen, I show Holly Fisher first. So Holly, would you go ahead and invite and introduce yourself?
I sure can. Thank you, Anita. My name is Holly Fisher. I'm a director at Family Services of Northeast Wisconsin, which is a nonprofit here in Brown County. Our mission is to protect, heal, and care. And part of my role here at Family Services is I oversee the Sexual Assault Center, which provides 24/7 victims, 24/7 advocacy services to victims of sexual assault, and also the Willow Tree Cornerstone Child Advocacy Center, which provides forensic interviewing, trauma-informed therapy, advocacy, and prevention education to thousands of children in our area. So I have over 13 years of victim advocacy experience. I've been involved in Brown County CCR since 2015, I believe, and have been part of a number of initiatives. But I will pass it along to someone else. I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you. Lauren is next on my screen. Lauren.
Hey there. My name is Lauren Krakowski. I'm the Child Protection Coordinator with Brown County Health and Human Services. And with that, Brown County is one of the largest counties in the state of Wisconsin, as you all likely know. And with that and, child welfare, we receive a lot of referrals every single year. And I have the pleasure of working with some really incredible, caring, talented individuals that take reports of child maltreatment, do investigations of maltreatment, but then also work with families throughout the process to help heal and grow. My job at Brown County is I supervise the supervisors that work with some of these talented staff, and I have this incredible opportunity to be able to have generalized oversight on programs and different initiatives for child welfare. But also through my work with Brown County, I've had an opportunity to be on the coordinated community response team for, I think, really the entirety of my time with Brown County. So since 2012, and really, we were talking before, having people kind of coming and going throughout time, and an opportunity to really connect with community members, partners, as we go. So it's really been a nice opportunity to meet with and collaborate across time with everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, Lauren. Bev Scow is on my screen next.
Thank you. I'm Beverly Scow. I am the new executive director at Wise Women Gathering Place. And we've been a nonprofit for 24 years in the community. We joined the Oneida CCR and the Brown County CCR and Outagamie's DVIT team in about 2005. We provide victim services and housing support, and we really provide a lot of support around healing from the trauma of victimization. And we have a lot of efforts around prevention, youth services programs. We are a culturally specific program. Our board, our leadership, and our staff are majority Native American, and we provide a Native American approach to a lot of our services while having our doors open to everyone who comes to us for support. So we appreciate collaborating with the mainstream service providers and offer services to complement especially for people of color.
Thank you, Bev. Stephanie, you're on my screen next.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Prevost. I'm the Assistant Director at Golden House. Golden House is the domestic violence agency in the county in Green Bay, and we offer a variety of services that include therapy, support groups, anything from legal services to counseling, general counseling, and also shelter. I don't know if I said that. Our mission is first and foremost safety and support. So we are available 24/7. I personally have been with Golden House for 16 of the last 20 years in the capacity of an advocate and a therapist, and now the assistant director.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much. Kevin, you're on my screen next.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Warwick. I'm the Commander of Operations for the Green Bay Police Department. I represent all law enforcement. The sexual assault, domestic violence has no boundaries. And, on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, the Pierre, Schwabenon, Green Bay, and Hobart Lawrence, all the agencies, we have a coordinated response as we're the frontline workers that respond to these incidents and then pull in all these resources, all these great people working together to help these victims. So it's really a coordinated response for us, that being the biggest agency, we have the largest numbers that are reported here in the city of Green Bay. Very sad, very tragic. And it's really about how the department and any law enforcement agency can work with other organizations to help these victims. It's not the days of arresting our way out of problems are over. And we have to think of different ways to make sure that we can help these victims not only become so that they're not re-victimized, but to prevent other victims and most importantly, hold people accountable for their actions. So on behalf of all law enforcement, I hope I can give that perspective. Just know that it's just not just Green Bay.
That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Because in the title, we said Brown County, but it does represent a much larger range of individuals in this region. So thank you so much, Kevin. Dave, you're next on the screen.
All right, good morning. My name is David Lassay. I'm the Brown County District Attorney. I've been in the elected district attorney since 2012. I've been working in this office for the vast majority of my career as an attorney, starting in 2002. I started working with the CCR, I think around 2010. So I've been doing this for about a dozen years and working with the community partners to try to prevent domestic violence, to try to make a coordinated and more effective response to representing crime victims, to supporting them through the process and through holding offenders accountable in various ways. As Kevin indicated, it's not just the traditional methods of arrest and incarcerate and hope that the problem is going to go away. We try to work together to find creative responses to make sure that we are supporting those crime victims, making sure we're giving them everything that they need, and then also, frankly, supporting and holding accountable the offenders. And these coordinated teams that we have at all levels, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, they've really been an excellent tool, an opportunity for us to reach out to the community, find out what the need really is, and hopefully find a more effective response.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave. I sure appreciate that. I'm always impressed when I work in areas and there is longevity. And so we have a pretty strong history of folks being in their roles, and that's super important. And so one of the first questions that we'd like to ask you panelists is how has the format of caring for victims changed in victim services in terms of how long you've been around? What changes have you all seen? And everyone doesn't have to answer, but let's just have a couple of answers about the changes since the beginning of your tenure to now.
I'm not sure who wants to go first, so
You can go,
I'll
Holly.
step in. The sexual assault response team predated me, but that protocol has been in place since 2008. And so anytime a victim of sexual abuse responds to the hospital for a sexual assault nurse exam or goes to law enforcement to report their assault, an advocate is called every single time, no matter what time of day it is. So that ensures that we are working to reduce re-victimization, that we are upholding the rights of the crime victim, and we're carrying on that support throughout the process, because it doesn't stop once they report it and once they get that exam. There's a long journey of healing. Recently, there's been some exciting things happening in the work with domestic violence. So I will let Stephanie talk about that.
I guess part of the, the county or as part of domestic violence, we do, since 2017, the police officers had started doing we introduced the lethality assessment protocol, which is a nationally evidence-based tool to assess the risk of homicide. And with that, we've been able to really kind of help victims to be able to better identify their safety. I think that a lot of times it gets kind of minimized in a lot of different ways. And there are definitely some indicators that tell us that that's not true. And so it helps us to be able to work more closely with the community and with our victims specifically. Also alongside of that, then introduced the domestic violence high risk team in 2020. And that is a team that consists of Golden House, the DA's office, probation, parole, Green Bay Police Department, and other police departments as incidents happen in their area. And it really helps us to be able to help the victim full circle and walk them through each of the through the legal system, which is really, really confusing. It just kind of gives everybody a soft transfer to everything, and we all know about kind of what's going on. So those are two things that have been really, really helpful and have changed the way that we work with victims most recently.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I'll go. There's, I think, been a recognition of a disparity of Native Americans and people of color accessing victim services support. And initial efforts were to provide funding for a person of that community to work in a mainstream organization. But there's been more of a recent shift to recognize the value and impact of culturally specific organizations providing those services. That creates more of a safety and an avenue for people to access those services. So We All Rise, African American Resource Center is a new, also culturally specific victim service provider in our community as well.
Excellent. And so, Bev, that actually points us to the reason that we have an implicit bias conference, because we know that different victims coming from different backgrounds, in particular, some that have been marginalized historically, have different needs. And so I appreciate you highlighting that and elevating the conversation to just an understanding that some of the things that aren't talked about often really need to be talked about so that we can have equitable support for victims across races, ages, statuses, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm curious, want to get some of the questions that you all were provided in here to know if one thing you all think is different about how victims of different backgrounds can kind of access or respond to supportive services. So it's kind of, yeah. Do you all see a difference amongst different groups of victims from different backgrounds? Because Bev, you alluded to that, because people need different things. They have different experiences, and they experience law enforcement, they experience the judiciary, they experience advocacy very differently. So I'm curious just to know in your experience if you've noticed some different needs from different people groups.
Yeah, I'll be happy to start. I certainly, I think that, you know, when we talk about implicit bias and historical racism and some of the disparities in the criminal justice system that have existed for a long time, it certainly represents itself in terms of how we can interact with crime victims. There's understandably a lot more distrust from populations that have been marginalized. It's harder, it's more challenging to make those connections and to make them feel as if they are supported. And I think that's certainly, it's understandable, and it's a barrier that we have to continually work to address. I think as Bev talked about, the importance of having that culturally specific support and the relationships with the advocacy groups has been important. You know, we had experienced these things traditionally with women over time 20, 30 years ago, where you know, women didn't want to report sexual assault and domestic violence because they likewise felt they weren't going to get a fair shake within the system. Sure. I think we have started to grow that. And you know, using those same methodologies, I think we can also continue to grow trust with traditionally marginalized communities as well. And it's important that we recognize that people will respond to the system differently based on the historic trauma that's been suffered. And we have to react appropriately and ensure that everyone feels welcome to participate in this system and knows that their voice will be heard.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for that, Dave. Bev, I want to jump back to you really quickly because you did just share something that opens up a broad perspective about culturally specific support. People have been grumpy or angry about the reality that there are centers, et cetera, that have a culturally specific hint. And so you will hear people say, well, why do they feel like they need a special session? Bev, would you mind, can you speak to, and David just a little bit alluded to it, like why does a culturally specific service provider, why will they have more people from that group show up? Can you just share a little bit about what you think about that?
Well, like Dave said, right, there is a long history of distrust from mainstream social service agencies, law enforcement, the systems, because you know, our families have been harmed by the theft of our children when social services got involved, or we were unheard, or when our family members were faced charges, there was a different outcome, right? There was a much harsher sentencing process that affected them compared to the white population. And so there's a distrust of that. And so sometimes the abusers that are impacting our lives, harming us, our family or community members, but we resist reporting because we know they're going to get, we want the abuse to stop, mm-hmm. right? But we also don't want that person to experience, you know, the worst outcomes. We want people to heal and come back in community in a real way and be our brothers, our fathers, our sisters, or, you know, our family, be back in community and wellness. But going into just jail they're not going to come back in a way that they can come back and be a part of community. Mm-hmm. So so that's been a big barrier for people to report even.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And so, Dave, you alluded to implicit bias and the impact in terms of the statistics of sentencing, the statistics of harsher penalties, and all those things being barriers to people coming forward and even seeking supportive services when they've been a victim. I want to move into our just next kind of series of questions. What advice do you all have for victims or survivors who have been abused, assaulted, et cetera, et cetera? Like, let's just walk through the process of who gets involved when a person is assaulted or is attacked. So I call in, where's the first place that I would call to get help when I find myself, after the just totally disorienting assault or attack? Like, what do I do? Somebody want to chime in? What's the first thing you all suggest a victim do?
I can start there. The most important thing a victim can do in that scenario is just call the police and have that officer respond, because that is crucial. And the way officers respond and the way they approach that situation really starts the whole plan for the victim in motion. And we talk with officers, we approach it with empathy, with respect, and really most importantly, trying to help that victim. So then the officer will then gather the facts, put that investigation together, and then what Stephanie had mentioned, determine with that lethality assessment their level of risk. And every domestic violence incident, we contact the family violence shelter to report that. And that's important because once the officer puts the case together for the district attorney, we notify the family or Golden House, then the Golden House takes over from there, and then it goes through the court system.
Well, okay, thank you. Yes, someone else, anybody else want to respond?
From the advocacy perspective, it might look a little bit differently because our role as advocates is to empower and give victims choices because they've just gotten that control taken away from them. So if they want to report, that's absolutely fine. We will call law enforcement, have them come take a statement. If they don't want to, that's fine as well. In terms of sexual assault victims, we offer education about if they're in the window for a sexual assault nurse exam. And again, they can choose to receive that exam or not. They can choose to report, or they can store that evidence for 10 years as they make that decision if they want to report their crime or not.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we know that the criminal justice system doesn't always necessarily work in the victim's favor. So that could be a reason they wouldn't want to report. And then let's look at other ways of healing besides reporting the crime. So when they come to an advocacy organization first, the process will look a little bit different than if they access other systems.
First, thank you for that. I want to give our chat some energy right now. So I want to read a few questions from our chat and just some comments from the chat. The first question is, does Brown County have advocacy respond to most DV? And I think you just answered that question. So yes, whenever it's we're made aware of a domestic violence situation, advocacy is available. The next question or statement, it's a statement. I feel working with some Native Americans in my field that they're guarded and mistrust when you offer a referral for support. And Bev and David talked a little bit about why, the historic background of why they might be that distrust and their guardedness and then protecting themselves. And so we're doing good answering these. And then another one, I believe that people who become physical and or coercive to a person are in need of now being on the spectrum of lethality. I also believe that we should educate the public of that. the way it is right now, they think that they can do those things and ignore the upgrade in their methods of control towards violence. The way things are now, without that awareness, they are still able to deny and minimize that fact. Would anyone like to address that or respond to that one? How are people put on the spectrum of lethality?
I mean, I think we talked about the fact that within the last 5 years, we've started to use a tool to try to assess that. I mean, that is an evidence-based tool, and we do have to work with people based on the facts and circumstances as we're given, right? We only have the facts that are made available to us from the victims who have been in those situations. So presuming we are getting accurate answers to those questions, we have a screening tool that helps us try to assess where they are on that lethality assessment. It's hard to create a spectrum, right? It's hard to say you're at a 1 out of 12. These situations are so fluid and so dynamic that it's really hard to assess that. But that is the purpose of that screening tool, is to attempt to let the crime victims know that you are at a greater risk for lethality under these circumstances based on the factors that you described. In terms of the services that are delivered to offenders, that certainly, batterers treatment is a hot topic. There aren't a lot of providers who provide that specific treatment. That availability of that treatment is something that is challenging, and also the appropriateness of that treatment for someone who's committed a domestic violence offense. As Al's indicated, I think there is a spectrum. Not every single person that commits what would legally qualify for a domestic violence offense is guilty of this power and control dynamic. We know that that's very present for many batterers. We don't know that that's present for everyone who qualifies under those circumstances. Domestic violence, as defined under the law, is very broad. You could have an adult son who lives at home and gets into a fight with his father. We don't necessarily have the traditional domestic violence dynamics that are always associated with that, but it still would be referred and potentially charged that way under Wisconsin law. So every situation is fact specific, and it is really challenging to find a tool that really assesses that. But I think Alice's, the baseline of Alice's point is that if you're willing to use physical coercion, physical violence to manipulate a situation, that it is important to convey to batterers the dangerousness of your willingness to engage in that behavior.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. And so there's another comment in the chat about the window for evidence. And they are just reminding people that patients should still come in and be seen by an RN, because there's a lot more available than just the rape kit. And so the services that our advocacy agencies offer obviously are more than just a rape kit. There's counseling referrals made available. There's housing referrals. There are a number of referrals that are made available. And the conference today has workshops that are going to address those. And so thank you so much for that. Does a same time advocate arrive a company? Oh, that was another question that was earlier.
No, DV advocates don't respond at the scene just due to safety considerations. So the officer will call Golden House to connect the victim to advocacy services.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's the question that I'm trying to clear. Okay. There are a lot here. STI, medication documentation for tax. I think that the attendees in the chat are having a communication amongst themselves. And so that's what's happening right here. I'm going to read the last one. What kind of training and education do law enforcement currently receive in order to work specifically with victims of sexual violence? And how does Brown County Police specifically address implicit bias for officers who are first responders to DV and sexual assault cases? Calls.
So I can respond to that one. As law enforcement, we make a priority to train implicit bias, diversity, inclusion, because when we deal with victims, every victim is different, and the scenario is different, and everything. And like we talked before, everybody has different needs, and everybody has different thoughts and feelings. And as police officers, we have to take care, and we have to take that into consideration, and we have to make sure that we provide the best service we possibly can. So I can speak for in Green Bay, we have that training that's implemented when we send new officers to the sexual assault response training, or we send new officers to the Golden House, or we incorporate that in the field training program in their new officers. But it's important that it's ongoing training too, so that it's not just one time training session and then you go a 30-year career without it. I can tell you that in Green Bay, we have brought in trainers to give that perspective. We had a professor from UWGB a year or 2 years ago come in and talk about implicit bias and make officers feel uncomfortable. And I think that's important because you want to get them to look at different perspectives, because people are coming at this from different perspectives. People don't have different thoughts, feelings, backgrounds, and their own biases that we all have to work together so that we are providing that service and helping that victim in any way that we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you so much. All right, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to speak to the training officers receive on responding to sexual assaults. All new officers in Brown County receive an 8-hour training regarding responding to sexual assaults through the START protocol. So it includes trainers from Brown County Sheriff's Office, the Sexual Assault Center, Dana Stuber, who is the SANE coordinator at St. Vincent Hospital, Kim Hardkey, who is the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act regional prosecutor. She works out of the district attorney's office, and Christy Sickle, who is a forensic interviewer and program manager at Willow Tree. So it's a comprehensive training regarding how to respond, how to collect evidence, how to avoid re-traumatizing victims, when to use the Child Advocacy Center for forensic interviews. So all members of the team understand what our objective is, and we're providing consistent trauma-informed response.
Excellent, thank you for that, Holly. So a coordinated community response, just the team kind of concept actually was birthed in the late 80s out of Duluth, with Minnesota, and it came to be named the Duluth model of coordinated community response. And the reason that it was said to be effective is because it connected all of the different entities that touched a victim. And much of the language, the original language about CCR speaks to victims as women, because 85% of domestic violence victimization actually happens where there's a male perpetrator and a woman victim. And so we know that some of those statistics are changing, and we have a session that is going to kind of look at that and kind of address that. But what do you all in the coordinated community response and efforts to make sure that all victims are cared well for, how is there a difference when there is same-sex violence or when there is violence that is perpetrated on a man against a woman? I'm curious to hear your guys' experience or thoughts on that.
I think a lot of the same biases that we talked about in terms of willingness to access services and respond to service are certainly present in those situations as well. I think there's a lot more hesitation, particularly on the part of male crime victims. There's definitely still this bias that, well, you're a male, you're presumably larger and stronger, you should not be a victim in this situation. Why are you reporting? And males feel less comfortable to access those services. Certainly the responses that our victim staff gets and that our office gets from males tends to be very different. They tend to be far more hesitant, far more willing to say, look, I don't want this to happen. And then of course, there's also the implicit biases that I think we have as prosecutors and as law enforcement officers. When you hear a male reporting, is you're always immediately concerned, well, is this someone reporting their victimization as an attempt to manipulate? Because we have seen that. We see batterers who will, they'll say, I called first, right? I'm the first one who made the phone call. So, I'm the victim. Well, you weren't the victim in this circumstance. And we know that from talking to the children or other witnesses on scene, but they did call first. So I think there's also that bias that we have, that we struggle with, that when we work with males who truly are victims of domestic violence and same-sex relationships as well. So that continues to be a problem. And I think we need to address it, find creative solutions, talk about it, and make sure that we're providing equal service to everyone.
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And so we know that implicit bias is just a form of bias that occurs automatically and unintentionally. And so a CCR is important to implicit bias, because as you spend more time on the community response team, you get to know people, and then people get more relaxed, and people then don't feel embarrassed about questions that they might think are silly questions. And so that's one of the reasons that CCRs actually are productive in terms of caring best or caring better for victims. And so as we look at the research, we know that implicit bias can be mitigated with awareness and effective bias reduction strategies. And so a few of those strategies actually reduce implicit bias. And underrepresented groups is essential to achieve true diversity and inclusion within an organization. And so there are conversations across the universe right now about increasing diversity and increasing representation from marginalized people groups and those kind of things. Would you all like to talk about any of the conversations you're having in your agencies, or some efforts that you're undertaking to try to do to make increased diversity in your ranks?
I can take that. At Golden House in our we have a cultural and diverse group who meets you kind of go through. There's a trauma-informed assessment that the agency takes, and this particular group has gone through and really tried to go through each of those points to be able to make sure that they are culturally specific and welcoming to how are we serving that population. So we go through each of those points and make sure that Golden House is working really hard to meet that. Now, you kind of also talked about kind of in the hiring process, and we try to, have advocates who are from all different cultures, and it can be really difficult to do. So that is one of the areas that we kind of keep trying to work at. Those are some of the things that we're working on.
That's great. And I think the big thing is that you're aware that there is a need for it, and you work on it, and you can only do the best that you can with what's available in terms of your applicant pools and all of those different things. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. So we kind of have been painting a picture of like what happens when a victim or a person has been involved in domestic or sexual assault. Sometimes a phone call is made, sometimes an advocate gets involved, sometimes the police get involved. But we know that the intent is to make sure that we are supporting the victims and we're holding offenders accountable. One of the reasons that the coordinated community response worked and became an award-winning system of supportive services is because they listened to battered women. They regarded them as the true experts of their experiences. And then they created this real community-based response with multiple agencies, and there's the victim's safety really high in their consciousness and their chief concern. And then they didn't just stop there and say, okay, well, let's penalize the abusers, but they really tried to provide men who abuse an alternative to violence. And David talked a little bit about that being a hot topic, battered intervention, and just the availability of some of that programming. And I think that as we truly endeavor to make communities safe, we do have to kind of turn the focus to making sure that the folks that are committing the violence are addressed and that kind of thing. And that will require that we have resources available to promote more of those programs and that kind of thing. But we can't have those resources taken away from the actual services to the victims. And so there's always a balancing act that you have to do with that. And so I want to ask the question, what are some things people should know about the barriers to victim support? What are some things that people know? Because people that don't know get really angry and they try to tell you all who are the experts in this work how to do your jobs. What are some of the things that they wouldn't know because they're not in the day-to-day operations? And what are some things that if they knew would perhaps cause them to be a little bit more patient or gracious or that kind of thing? I want to hear back from you all because you're in the trenches.
You know, I think my coffee machine's going off. Part of my perspective is a little different in the sense that it is child welfare specific and whatnot. And some of the things that I've been thinking about as this conversation has gone on is really, I think child welfare does often get asked, you know, what does it take for somebody to be involved, or what does that look like, especially with small victims where kids aren't always able to share what has happened to them in a way that an adult may be able to. And when we consider reporting with Child Protective Services, one of the things that I really think about from anyone that would be here listening that cares about kids, that has a responsibility around mandatory reporting, where my head really goes to is we want to make sure kids are safe, right? All of us do. My agency, the one that I work for, and as a statewide system, we have this responsibility, right? So it's in statute related to what we can and cannot do. And as I'm thinking about circumstances in which community partners have been frustrated with child protection in the past, it usually comes down to why are you not doing something in this circumstance?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I would really love to stress in this moment for anyone that is listening is we do want to make the best decisions, and those decisions come from information that we are getting at the point of access, and allowing for community partners to be able to elicit information so that we do have good information to make good decisions in regards to response for children that are victims of maltreatment, victims of sexual assault, victims in circumstances where they have parents or caregivers with intimate partner violence or other types of domestic violence in the home. And so as you speak about things to know, I think it's really each system, it has this want and need to do the best work that they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with communication, information sharing whenever possible, and then that collaboration and moving forward. And I see that as really this critical component with the multidisciplinary teams. And, you know, the CCR at its core is a multidisciplinary team, really working together to think about ways in which we as a community can step up and do better when we learn additional things that we can focus on and make changes to.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for that. Anyone want to piggyback on that or have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Lauren makes a great point, and that's been one of the most valuable things that I've taken away from working in these community response teams, is to really have a better appreciation of everyone else's role and why people do what they do. It's easy, particularly in the world we live in now, for everyone to have all the answers in a comment on social media, right? And to not necessarily appreciate the complexity of these problems. And I think particularly as it relates to domestic violence, I think a lot of times we ask these questions and we victim blame, and we say, well, why did the victim engage in this particular conduct? Why did they go back? Why did they return? And one of the things that I think I learned the most early on is the real practicality of the problems that these crime victims have. We'll see many recants from crime victims. No, this didn't happen, minimizing their abuse because they don't have anyone to take care of the kids. They don't have anyone to pay the bills. They don't have anywhere to live. So, you know, all of the basic needs that surround many of the people that come into the criminal justice system, I think, provide the biggest barrier. You know, we're concerned at looking at it from a macro level of what should happen, whereas the people who are oftentimes the victims and the abusers, they're looking at it and what am I going to do today? What am I going to do tomorrow? Where are my kids going to live? How are my kids going to eat? How am I going to get to work? So I think the biggest barriers that I see to finding the outcomes that we would all like is poverty, is resources, is all of those practicalities that exist really become the biggest dynamics in these domestic violence cases.
Wow, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
I
Sure.
agree. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying.
Okay. I agree. We have a talented staff, who can provide support in advocacy, in navigating the legal system, and supporting a healing process from the trauma of recent abuse, as well as the added of historical trauma and how that adds to that experience. But our society allows homelessness to exist. We are not providing homes to everyone. Our society allows a minimum wage of 7 whatever, when the living wage for Green Bay is 17.20 something an hour. That should be the minimum living wage. That should be our minimum wage
Mhm.
in our community. And we could make that a law in our community, so that when the people are coming to us, we're not having to scramble our resources to make sure they got a place to sleep tonight temporarily, and have food to eat, or or even access to healthcare, right? Our advocacy support can go so far, but when they've gone through a trauma like this, they need access to ongoing regular counseling and medical support. And our society isn't providing that right now. And so that's falling on us as victim service provider agencies. That's really out of our scope, but it's a part of all of our scope. It's important for all of us in this community to make sure those resources or basic needs are available.
Sure. And I think that a panel like this is raising a consciousness, and really what we're hoping to do is normalize the conversation so that people, it's not the first time people heard it, that they've heard it and they get activated about doing something. And I once heard a presenter and she said the problem with having advocacy and victim support services is that when there is an agency named for that, then other people think, oh, they'll take care of it all. And they stop working. And I think I like your point, Beverly, about it's all of our responsibility, because many hands make light lifting. And so if all of us are aware, if the conversation is normal so that it's top of mind, we can activate quickly with referrals and sharing resources. That's when it's going to get done. And it's not a burden to any institution. Other folks have any comments or any thoughts? There was a question about where we could get contact information about individuals who are willing to present implicit bias talkers. I put a few agencies or people that we have used in the chat. And so I don't know if you all have other folks that you want to put in the chat as people that you have used to do either training on or education on implicit bias. Okay, so let's kind of keep moving. I'm appreciative of the contributions that you all are making, and I'm excited because many of the workshop in today's conference office offering actually will be addressing some of those things. And so I really invite people who haven't looked at the entire agenda to look at the entire agenda and see if some of the things that your curiosity has been piqued about are going to be answered with some of our workshops. So let's just kind of keep moving with like kind of the best practices. It's marvelous to hear about the synergy that is happening across the agencies. I have a list of all of the agencies that we work with, and I want to just share that list real quickly so that people can see the breadth of who's involved in the work that we're doing. And so if you all could just for a second hold on and let me share this. Then I'll go back to another set of questions. And so the folks that are involved on our coordinated community response efforts are Disability Rights Wisconsin, iHeartWorld, Prevea, Oneida Domestic Abuse Program, Golden House, St. Willebrod, Brown County District Attorney's Office, who house the Victim Witness Specialist, Child Protective Services, the Department of Corrections, Brown County Sheriff's Office, Ashwaubenon Public Safety, St. Vincent's Hospital, Green Bay Public Police Department, Brown County Judiciary, Sexual Assault Center, Wise Women Gathering Place. We We All Rise, Green Bay Public Schools, De Pere Police Department, Wrightstown Police Department, Pulaski Police Department, Oneida Police Department, Hobart Lawrence Police Department, St. Louis Norbert College, and individually Judge Hammer. Those are just some of the individuals that, some of the departments and agencies that are members of and participate closely with our CCR. If I missed anybody, please chime in. But you get to start seeing this network, this broad network of individuals that are having information shared, that are using education and what they learn to just be better and offer better support to our victims. And what I hope is that the more we have those conversations and the more people get educated about what's happening and how it happens, then the better we'll be at quelling the amount of violence that's happening. Right now, that's not true. We know that there are tons of statistics that are discouraging about the amount of violence that is happening in Brown County and in the outskirts. And so I wonder if anybody would like to think or talk about statistics, any statistics that you want to share about how much domestic violence is happening in our region. Anybody?
I think, Golden House could perhaps talk about the number of people that are referred into their agency every year, and law enforcement can as well. I mean, I anticipate that we will have probably between 800 and 900 referrals for domestic violence cases in Brown County this year. And again, that is reported cases where law enforcement is called and they find probable cause and refer it to our office. So that's a small number compared to the actual amount of domestic violence that's occurring. But that alone is an alarming figure to think that there are, between 800 and 900 referrals for criminal charges of domestic violence in the Green Bay area.
Yeah, and to just continue to paint a picture of the breadth of the issue, if you have 800 or 900 reported cases, and let's just say that most of those cases there, you had little people present at the scene. And so, because in most domestic violence cases, younger children are present. And so when you start thinking about trauma lenses and how you're going to heal a community, it's important to see and understand like how much trauma is being deposited into the youngest members of our community. And that's why it's important for us to be talking about this so that people think differently about behavior that they have in their control. Any more statistics? Anybody else want to share some of the statistics for their agency?
Well, I know in terms of sexual assault, the Sexual Assault Center, we've served over 1,000 victims this year in 2022. Yeah. Not all of those were reported to law enforcement, but all the ones who have received advocacy services.
Sure. And we already identify why they're not reported for a broad number of reasons. Distrust of public service officials, distrust of systems, distrust of good intentions. We also know that there are people groups that are protecting the abusers, the perpetrators in their community because they don't feel like they're going to be fairly adjudicated when they engage some of the systems and the processes. Other statistics.
I can tell that the number, if you have a number in your head, it's higher than what you think it is. And you challenge yourself and you ask yourself, why is that the case? And I don't think anybody's got the answer. We've got a lot of responses, but it is really shocking to see these high numbers. I review the cases that come in every day in the department, and you see that. And like Dave said, those are the only ones that generate a report. What are all the other cases that may or may not be or go unreported? That's the number where it could be, 3-4 times the number of actual reported cases. So it is pretty shocking to see and alarming, because that's why we do the work that we do. That's why we have this coordinated effort where each person has a different perspective to come at this, to help these victims and to help prevent future victims, because we know this number and these statistics are so alarming.
Sure.
Kevin, I think you bring up a really good point too, in regards to so knowing the numbers and different things like that, but I think about just with the response that we have and how things are working at this point in time, we are successful in making sure that if something is reported or not, that perhaps it's not something that child protection can do or something that law enforcement can do. I think about like our relationship just between the two agencies and how frequently communication and collaboration occurs where it's, you know, this isn't necessarily something that we could refer charges over, but I'm worried about this family. It's frequent that law enforcement is sending us information to say X, Y, and Z is concerning, and it may be best suited with your response versus our response. And I think that's what a lot of this is so critically about, is making sure that we pay attention to all of the different responses and what makes the most sense for the family at that time. That there's different roles and responsibilities for each agency, but what does that mean and who's best going to serve that family while still ensuring that the needs of each agency are being met, that victims are receiving what they need, that offenders are being held accountable as appropriate. It's really, again, bringing it back to the relationships have allowed for us to be able to have those conversations to say, this isn't a law enforcement matter, but my team is very concerned about this family because of X, Y, and Z, and ensuring that that communication is there so that the collaboration can happen and we can make sure that families and children are receiving what they need.
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And so we talk about collaboration, we talk about partnerships, we talk about relationships, we talk about a coordinated coordination of efforts and responses. And I want to just highlight, I have my button on, it's the 2/12 Safe campaign, and Tuesday, we launched a community effort, and it was actually sponsored by an individual that said, you know what, I want to elevate the conversation about how much domestic violence is happening in the Brown County area and the resources that are available. And so this campaign, you dial 920-212 and then SAFE, and it connects you to the advocates over at Golden House, and they can give you referrals about resources and a number of other things. There is a packet of information for the Be Safe campaign, and my understanding is that it's going to run at least for 6 months, and it again is just highlighting the existence of domestic violence in our broad community. And they have with it, if you go to the site 920-212-SAFE.com, they will download or what's available is a list of different resources that are available in the broader community, and information if you have someone, a victim that is not quite ready to leave, and Holly identified that really nicely, that pure supportive services doesn't tell the victim what they should do. It asks the victims, what would you like support with? It gives information that's broad and complete so that they have the ability to make an informed decision. And so we are grateful for this coordinated community response team, because we know that it gives victims information that allows them to make informed decisions, and it activates the systems that are able to support victims when they can't support themselves. And so as we attempt to kind of just start bringing our time together to a close, I want to just pause for a second and ask you to think about one thing that you're the most proud of that your agency has engaged in, perhaps in the last 5 years, or perhaps a specific story that you would like to share that engenders hope for victims or survivors of domestic or sexual violence. So just pause for a second, let you guys think about it, and then have someone jump in and just share what they're proud about with their agency, and maybe what they're hopeful for, and then maybe a story that helps us who get pretty kind of discouraged from the reality of the high statistics and the amount of actual victimization that's happening. Give us some hope here as we get ready to try to transition out of this session.
I've got some numbers. So we served, Wise Women last year served over 1,200 people.
Mhm.
And 9,000 of those services were around domestic violence services, and 2,700 of those services were around sexual assault. Our culturally specific healing program, White Bison Mending Broken Hearts, has We offer that 3 or 4 times a year. There's always, and it's most of the people who come to us word of mouth. But when they go through that healing, 4-day healing program, most come through and say it was transformative. It was a way for them to understand the historical trauma as well as their current situation, and it allowed them to do some significant healing work so they could let some of that go and focus on their own wellness and also what they're going to pass on to the next generation. We're also proud that we started the safe parking program that allows a safe place for people who are homeless and living in their cars. It's not ideal, but it's in that continuum of homelessness that is our reality in Green Bay. And it gives them a place where they can safely belong, and a way for us to then intersect and provide, build a relationship and provide them access to other services. And so we've been really happy with how that has, how that's been able to help people. And there's victims who are in safe parking as well, right? There's always some victims, and we're able to engage them with the advocacy support services.
Yeah, I just want to jump into that safe parking, because I think that's a phenomenal outside of the box kind of way of thinking, because, you know, you have places that criminalize people for sleeping in their cars. You know, you can get ticketed, and which further complexity is a further layer of like the challenge already of trying to get well, of trying to just move forward after being victimized or in a traumatic situation. And so kudos to you all for that safe parking program and the efforts that you are making to just meet victims where they are. So thank you so very much for that. And I had intended to do this before, but I want to just pause for a second because I wanted to honor Alice Skinador. Alice recently retired from her work at Wise Women Gathering, several years of service. And I said that how impressive it was that we had the longevity on this coordinated community response team that we have, but Alice really gave her life to serving victims, survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and really just working to make change. And so Alice, I love you, and I just appreciate you and your service, and wanted to just give you a shout out and thank you for your service.
It was a lifetime, because even before we became an agency, she was a home birth midwife and often sheltered people in her home who were fleeing domestic violence. So thank you, Alice, for all that you've done.
Sure. Thank you. That may get us in trouble, but I would be remiss if I didn't share that. All right. So the question that was asked was for you all to just give us some hope. What are some things that you're proud of? What are some things that you want the whole community to know? We have about 121 folks on the in this session today. So let's share some things that will leave them hopeful.
For me, I'm really proud to work at Family Services with the mission of protect, heal, and care. We have many programs that focus on prevention and intervention. A lot of times we talk about the effects of trauma and the post-traumatic stress disorder, but we don't talk as much about the post-traumatic growth and the resilience that people have. And I think everyone who's on this call, who works within the CCR, really believes in that and really tries to be a supporter of resilience for people who've experienced trauma. So that gives me hope.
That's excellent, Holly. Yeah, like being a victim isn't a death sentence, right? Well, sometimes it is, but you all know the point that I'm making. It doesn't have to in your life. There are supportive services that can help you heal and move forward. Thank you for that. Other folks, what are you hopeful for? What would you like people to know?
I'm just hopeful that people keep coming to the table and having these conversations. I've been in the field long enough to see really, really horrible things happen to kids. And while there are lots of circumstances that we might not ever have had an opportunity to impact, the fact that we don't stop the conversation keeps me hopeful, that we don't stop talking about how else we can partner, ways in which we can support kids. I mean, Holly spoke a little bit about Willow Tree as a family services program, and Child Protective Services wouldn't be able to do the work we do without that collaboration and ensuring that in our constant, amount of cases that are coming through the door, that by virtue of walking through the doors at Willow Tree, each child gets individualized care and support in ways that I wish we could always do. But sometimes we really do have to lean on our partners to help in picking up some of those things and ensuring that things happen for kids when horrible things happen. And so by virtue of having kind of what we've coined as like this one-stop shop, it allows for kids to feel supported, safe, not having to disclose horrific things that happen to them in police departments or at schools or different things like that. I've been in this field long enough to have interviewed kids in police departments or gone and talked to them in closets at schools about horrific things that have happened. And we don't do that here. We won't do that here because it's not in the best interest of the child. And so that brings me hope. It brings me hope that we're going to just keep moving forward and doing the things that we need to do to support. In my realm and scope, it's really child victims and their parents, and seeing us being able to not only support the parent through the process, but also the child. That matters.
That's excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for that. Others, what are you hopeful for, thankful for, proud of, as we have 5 minutes left?
Yeah, I'm really just thankful for the coordination amongst all agencies involved. And I wish the community could see everybody that has a seat at the table that's part of this conversation. I am proud of the fact that we are relentless in the pursuit of people that commit these acts. Every morning, every day in law enforcement, we're talking about something horrific, someone's, the worst day of their life. And when it comes to sexual assault and domestic violence, those cases don't get closed. And I'm very proud of the fact, and I work with wonderful people, sworn and professional staff, that are dedicated to that mission to help these victims. So that makes me proud every day. That's what makes me come to work every day. There's no other career for me, but it's just really very humbling to see all the great work of all organizations, all the people, all the faces on this panel, and really outside this panel, because it really takes a community to tackle this problem.
Great, thank you, Karen. Stephanie, you were speaking.
Yeah, I would just say that I'm, most proud of our connections with the community and our ability to really be able to help victims walk through the entire process, whether that is the legal services or, counseling or any of those kinds of things. I think that, the incident happens and there's a lot of attention that's given to that, but there's so much aftermath that comes with that. And our ability to really be able to walk with them through all of those things is what makes me most proud and hopeful for people.
Excellent, thank you for that. Dave.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and piggyback on what folks have said, because it really is so meaningful. As Lauren indicated, the numbers and the trauma that we see, it can really bog you down as a person who works in this field and has for a long time. It's easy to sort of get disoriented and get jaded. And then having conversations like this makes us hopeful, because we know that there are people who care and that we want to change this. I'm proud of the fact that our response has been able to change through some grant work, some additional resources. We really improved our victim witness staff. We essentially doubled what our staff was, and we're able to proactively make contact with crime victims on, the day after their offense. When that case is first initiated in our office, we're able to proactively make contact with them on almost every case, especially when there's DV and sexual assault. But honestly, what really gives me hope is the people, and it's almost always young women, who've experienced this violence, and just watching their strength and resilience, sitting across the table from them, getting them justice, and after a trial, seeing how they can address their offender and how prepared they are to move on with their lives, and to show that person who committed this offense against them, to show them their strength and make that offender know that you no longer control me, that I'm going to move forward with my life. Those victims and their resilience, that's why we coined the term survivor, because they absolutely are. So, those warriors make me the most proud and most hopeful.
That's excellent. Thank you. I am so grateful for you all saying yes, and thank you for your service. Please don't leave yet before you can take the brief survey. It's just 2 questions at the end of our time together. And we want to continue to offer this kind of educational opportunity free of charge. And we want to continue to collaborate with our supporters at the CCR, and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee includes folks from Wise Women Gathering Place, Family Services of Wisconsin, Prevea Health, Probation and Parole, and Golden House Family Shelter. And so thank you all so much, and we hope you take the poll, and we'll see you at the next session. So thank you so much, and thank you all for being here, and have a great day at the conference.